see Dave and Jim leave the command module for their trip down to the moon, you being on your own.
How did it feel to see Dave and Jim leave the command module and go down to the surface of the moon when I was then going to be all by myself? That was the high point of my flight. I was so glad to get rid of those guys. You won't believe it. We had been cooped up in a space about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle for 4.5 days. And that's pretty close. And I was so happy to see them go somewhere else for a while. That meant that I had all that space all to myself, and I spent 3 days in lunar orbit by myself, actually working about 20 hours a day, because I had a lot of science to do, a lot of remote sensing, a lot of photography, a lot of visual observations. I was busy all the time. And I had that whole room to move around in by myself, so it was a lot more comfortable, and I didn't have to get somebody out of the way to get to whatever I needed to do. So I enjoyed my solo time probably as the high point of the flight. And to be perfectly honest, the best time of that solo flight was when I was behind the moon and I didn't even have to talk to mission control. So I was totally on my own, not having to talk to mission control or anybody, and that was the best part of the flight. Oh yeah, well, the idea, it gets kind of technical in a way. Our orbit, all the flights that had gone before ours went into an orbit that was plus or minus 10 degrees from the lunar equator. In other words, they're pretty much equatorial flights, right? And the reason for that was that we knew the gravitational constants at the equator. Our landing site was 28 degrees north. We were actually exploring new territory. And the gravitational constants were not what was planned on before we made the flight, and it did affect our flight somewhat. But when you're 28 degrees angle from the equator, over a 3-day period, the moon moves and rotates slightly, so the trajectory over the ground shifts a little bit to the west. Every time it would shift a little bit to the west because of the moon's rotation around the Earth. So I had to do a course correction before I picked them up and come back home to get back on the trajectory on the flight path or the ground track, where when they came off they were on that same ground track. So we had to make those kind of adjustments. The other thing about that is that when we first started talking about making lunar landings, the ascent stage of the lunar module, the trajectory that it went into, was calculated so that it would take 3 or 4 revolutions around the moon for the lunar module to catch up to the command module and into the docket. We found out that we didn't have to do that. That it was very simple for the lunar module to come right up into orbit right behind me, about 50 feet. And that's what we did. It was a very simple thing. But we found that flying around the moon and doing the things we had to do in real practice was a lot easier than what we had assumed it would be before. Yeah.
One last question. Oh,